And to another hyper-confident sports country. We're heading to New Zealand, where Chris Rattue is on the line to talk to us about how, well, we shouldn't actually bother having the Rugby World Cup next year. What we should do is just hand the trophy over to New Zealand right now. Morning, Chris.
Morning. How are you?
Yeah, so front page of the New Zealand Herald, it went absolutely worldwide because, you know, the difficulty is we can't really argue with it at the moment.
I was just trying to get your attention.
Yeah, Beauden Barrett is the best player the world has ever seen, and this team is playing rugby at a level that we haven't seen. Is the one caveat that we have in the rest of the world, the one bit of hope that we have, is that maybe, just maybe, they've peaked a year too early?
Yeah. Look, I'm trying not to sound arrogant. But I think the problem is they haven't peaked, and they're building a new way of playing there, and they've got the quality, with the attacking players. It's scary, some of the stuff that's appearing down here. Their outside backs have got so much skill, and I actually think they looked at the Lions series last year, which they drew, and that's that's probably not what the All Blacks wanted in a series like that, and thought we got to up the ante a bit, and they're looking at, I think they are finding new ways of playing the game.
Is there anybody in the Southern Hemisphere at the moment who can actually challenge them, who can give them a test that is something that they haven't seen? Or is there a possibility that what's going on is that at the moment, Australia are at a really low ebb in their cycle, South Africa are making a bit of a recovery, but they're coming from such a low base that, you know, it's hard to kind of say that they're the team that they will be when the World Cup rolls around. And that so the difference between them and the rest of the teams in the Southern Hemisphere is a bit more pronounced than it will be by this time 12 months.
Yeah, and I don't think Australia, if you're talking about the World Cup, I don't think Australia's got a chance. I just don't think they've got the power and the stamina to last the tournament. So in the last few years, the obvious significant problems the All Blacks have had are against Ireland, and there was one test against South Africa where the South African forwards really just ran over the top of them. So I think Ireland, England, South Africa, those are the dangers. But the problem with the All Blacks and playing the All Blacks is they only need a few minutes of their sort of excellence, and it rips teams apart. You know, you can play very well against them for long periods, but if you're not on for the whole time, they just kill teams in minutes. And I've got to be honest, I see it almost getting worse for other teams.
Like you mentioned the Wallabies there, and one of the reasons why there's kind of this confidence around the Irish team at the moment is not just because of the Grand Slam win earlier this year, but it is because we went down to Australia and won a first test series for decades and decades and decades in the Southern Hemisphere against Australia this June. So you're saying we shouldn't really be reading too much into that because Australia are crap?
No, I think the thing that Ireland has, maybe more than any other team, I think, is the ability to really contest the breakdowns against the All Blacks, and that's what you got to do. There's no other real way of stopping them. You have to slow them down, rip their ball away, contest virtually every breakdown and contest it hard. And I think of probably all the teams in World Rugby who can do that the best. I think maybe Ireland are the ones. But what the All Blacks are doing now, they're operating off turnovers, and what they're really getting good at is isolating players one-on-one, the matchups that they can win, and they've got such extreme talent with some of the athletes, and it's rather than struggling to find more of them, they're just coming out of the woodwork, and we're even getting some of the players in Australian Rugby League who have New Zealand links are putting up their hands, saying that they want to become All Blacks. And you're talking in a couple of cases here of guys of really extreme talent. There's a guy at Newcastle called Kalen Ponga who many people believe could develop into one of the Australian League greats. He's already put his hand up saying he wants to come to the All Blacks. So it's this sort of production line of extreme athleticism and talent. And what I think is happening at the moment is that the All Blacks are finding new ways of using it and using it to their advantage.
I'm reading your piece. You said the one thing that might possibly derail the All Blacks at the moment is the age profile and the injury profile of some of the other key players. And yet there does seem to be a strength in depth that will kind of perhaps ensure that isn't as damaging as it might be for a lesser talented squad or a squad that wasn't as deep. Who are the few players who are kind of maybe tilting in that direction of being a little bit too old or a little bit injury prone?
Well, I think, I don't believe that they have a really good pack, the All Blacks, but I don't believe they may have a better pack than certainly Ireland or South Africa. And I think if Malcolm Marx is on his game for South Africa and Matawera as well, I think South Africa can still give the All Blacks a lot of problems. If they were to lose some of their forwards, they could struggle. And they have a great upcoming hooker now in Cody Taylor, but there's a huge gap back to the next best. If Cody Taylor was to be hurt, they might have problems because Dane Coles, who was such a brilliant footballer in his prime, has had so many injury and concussion issues that no one down here feels that he will ever get back to his best. Kieran Reid is coming back, the great captain's come back from back surgery, and he's had his share of issues. And there are other selection areas, especially in the loose forwards, that aren't. Sam Cane has also just received another concussion. There's a lot of issues there that if they don't arise in the World Cup, they'll be okay. But I also believe that it could easily be derailed. Joe Moody, who's rising as a really outstanding loose head prop, has had another injury problem as well. So if you start to lose some of those, they could find it a bit tough in the forwards against the best teams, and then you can start to make headway against them. But they have a lot of cover for their brilliance in the backs.
It does sound, though, like it might not be time to jump the gun. It might not be time to hand over the William Webb Ellis trophy right now.
I just thought I'd do it now, mate. No, I really do. I think at their best, I got to say, at their best, what I think's developing there, I can't see anyone beating them. I can't at the moment. And when you throw people like Rieko Ioane, the rising centres they've got, if you throw Sonny Bill Williams at his best back into the mix, and there's injury doubts about him, and they can now flood the field in the last 30 minutes with these guys that have so much extreme acceleration and stepping ability that they just rip the game open at the end. When you bring guys like Damian McKenzie, possibly Richie Mo'unga on, they're just very hard to contain. And I know it's going to sound like arrogance over there. I accept that. I like to think that in the past, people like myself have called it when the All Blacks aren't going well, when we think other countries are going well. But I just see this team that's now rising as maybe taking the game to new levels.
So suddenly this game between Ireland and the All Blacks in November is a proper humdinger, like the best team in the Northern Hemisphere against the best team in the Southern Hemisphere. How big a level of a handicap would you put on that game at the moment? How many points do you expect New Zealand to win that match by?
Yeah. At the moment, I would think New Zealand will win it by 15 points. But it's funny that too, because there was so much emphasis on England when it was arranged, and really England have slipped away. And England, for its history, and this would be the pot calling the kettle black here, but a lot of people perceive English rugby to be quite arrogant. And I think of all the teams that the All Blacks play, New Zealanders hate to lose to England the most. It doesn't matter what state. It doesn't matter what state their game is in. So that will be a massive game. But I think it's now clear that Ireland's the big game on that tour, and it'll be a great matchup.
I dare say, Chris, that it's not a perception that the English are arrogant. It might be closer to fact.
I'm preaching to the converted.
And what about Eddie Jones? How is Eddie Jones perceived in New Zealand?
Very interestingly, when he got the job and started off so well, I think I did a few columns with him for a while, so I've had a little bit of contact with him, but not a lot. But there are people around who know Eddie a lot better than I do, and people like him. He's liked down here. But a lot of people who knew him and his history said to me that it won't last. The success won't last, and that's the history of Eddie Jones. And it's clear from the stories that have come out from England, he's an incredibly intense guy. Maybe that sort of intensity and obsessive sort of behaviour works for a while, but then it starts to wear thin. And there's been some sort of stories that are both sort of funny and telling that have come out of England, but, you know, he's texting guys during club games and stuff, texting them at half time. There's players getting injured in training. You just get this feeling that the walls are closing in, and it's very, you know, we're all in a way, you know, we like to think we're in control of our personalities, but we are pretty much controlled by our own personalities. It's very difficult for an obsessive person to pull back. People might say, well, ease up a bit, find new ways of doing it. But if we are who we are, and I think the things that I was told about Eddie Jones and the predictions that people I know made about his reign in England are starting to come true in a way.
Yeah.
That's what it's starting to look like.
Yeah, it looks like the countdown clock is on to, I don't know if he's actually going to make it as far as the World Cup. I was saying earlier on, in my mind, it's 50-50. The November series is going to be very important. And if New Zealand absolutely annihilate England, which is a possibility that might happen at Twickenham, then you can see...
Who would come in, do you think? Who are the...
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I suspect that they would be looking for a short-term fix to take them through to the next World Cup. So somebody like an Eddie Jones figure would actually be perfect. Somebody who comes in and is short-term and says these are the strict rules that we're abiding by. But actually, I don't care. It's like that's the correct answer to that one. It took me a second to get there.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you about Steve Hansen, because after the Lions tour, he came in for a fair bit of criticism from the New Zealand media and whether or not he was actually the right man to take this team forward. Has he won everybody back over by the quality of what's happened in the meantime?
Yeah, it's hard to, you know, some people just have a thing with the public and you know, I think back to Graham Henry, he was sort of untouchable in many people's eyes, no matter what happened. I think people are still waiting. New Zealand judges rugby really harshly. It doesn't take much for a coach to fall foul of the public. I sometimes read the comments. You know, for instance, we've gone through a period here where a lot of people have wanted Richie Mo'unga to get a start in the All Blacks. And for people who don't know Richie Mo'unga, he's the young, fast-stepping first 5'8" who's driven the Crusaders to a lot of success. And you read some of the comments and people talk about Steve Hansen protecting his boy Beauden Barrett and stuff like that. Comments that I would think are very harsh considering the level of rugby that Beauden Barrett has achieved. So, you know, there's certain parochialism here. There's still that parochialism between, say, the people from Canterbury who have their favourite players, as opposed to the other areas who might attack the coach on those sort of grounds.
Yeah.
So that still exists here. But I think that there's just no, we're talking about Eddie Jones and maybe his future being in doubt. It's nothing like that here. And I think that one of Steve Hansen's his great strengths is that it's pretty clear that his voice still gets through to the players, just as the great managers in sport around the world. Like, to me, the greatest is Alex Ferguson, who was able to reinvent himself in a way through many different eras of football. He went from an era where he could grow a team from within Manchester United to an era where he had to buy players, and he could get through to all manner of players, from the greatest stars to the newcomers. And I think Steve Hansen, while it's a very different environment down here, rugby in New Zealand is heavily controlled by the New Zealand Rugby Union, who I refer to as the Kremlin. There's less players don't break ranks here.
Yeah,
it's like a sort of a secret society in a way. So it's easier for coaches in that respect. But still, we have seen coaches in the past who have lost their teams, and Steve Hansen seems to be able to keep reinventing himself and still get his messages through. And I think that's very impressive.
We're obviously very interested in Joe Schmidt's future relationship with New Zealand rugby. Would he have to take a club job before he could be considered for the international job after the World Cup, if that was part of his thinking?
Well, I don't know if he had to, but I think the man's achieved so much that he shouldn't have to. For my money, he's the best coach in world rugby. And whereas what Steve Hansen has is a special ability to understand what makes New Zealand rugby players tick and how to make the All Blacks tick. But if you were to say who's the best coach in world rugby, I would say Joe Schmidt without a shadow of a doubt. And I think if New Zealand rugby is serious about getting the very best, then Joe Schmidt is the very best. And he would also take the All Blacks on another sort of reinvention, if you like. But how it works here is it's very in-house. Ian Foster's been the long-time deputy for Steve Hansen. I think he's favoured in the halls of power here, and most of the insiders here believe that it's a fait accompli that Ian Foster would get the job.
Chris, good stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
It's a pleasure.
Chris Rattue on the line from New Zealand, where they're polishing the William Webb Ellis and saying no.